Hi and hello. This is High Physics channel. Light part 2. In this we are going to discuss reflection of light. What is reflection? When light falls on a surface, it bounces off from the surface and this is called reflection. For example, here you have a picture scenery and the light from this object scenery falls on the still water pond and it bounces back and it reaches our eye, and this is why we see the image of the scenery around it in the water. This is called reflection. The water is reflecting the scenery around it. So the light from the object falls on the surface and it bounces back from the surface, or it bounces off from the surface, and this is called reflection. We see a reflection little bit elaborately. Let me take a pen and draw. So first let me draw a surface, right? This is a surface, reflecting surface. Usually reflecting surface is represented like this. So usually reflecting surface is represented like this. Okay, so this is a reflecting surface, right? And when a light ray, incident beam from an object strikes this surface, so this you call it as the incident ray. So I name this as I, right? I name this as I, and this incident ray from the object strikes the surface at the point, say O, at the point O on the surface. What the surface will do? The surface will bounce back this ray, right? The surface will bounce. This incident ray will bounce off the surface once again, right? So this you call it as the reflected ray, right? This you call it as the reflected ray. I mark this as R. So OR is the reflected ray. OI or IO is the incident ray. This is the ray that is coming from the object, falls on the reflecting surface and bounces as OR, right? So for mathematical purpose, for calculation purpose, we would like to draw one more line, which is an imaginary line from the point of incidence of the incident ray and the surface. The incident ray surface எங்க strike பண்ணுதோ அந்த point O ன்னு எடுத்துருக்கோம். அந்த O ல இருந்து ஒரு perpendicular draw பண்றோம். So we draw a perpendicular. Let me draw it in a different color so that we can have a clear idea that it is three lines are different. So this, let this be, I draw it clearly once again. So this be the normal. So I mark this normal as N. So there is no line as ON, but for mathematical purposes we assume that there is a line, and for sketching purpose we draw this normal ON. This will facilitate our calculation purpose. Now the angle made by the incident ray with the normal, the angle made by the incident ray with the normal, we call this as angle of incidence I. This is the angle of incidence I. So angle between the incident ray and the normal, imaginary normal which we have drawn, that you call it as the angle of incidence. And now we draw another angle between the reflected ray and the normal, right? So we draw another ray which is the angle of reflection. So this is the angle of reflection. Angle of reflection is the angle between the reflected ray and the normal, which is R, right? So this is the basic part of reflection. So this is the surface. So let me call the surface as, say, PQ, right? I call the surface as P and Q. So you have a PQ surface, polished surface, smooth surface, which is a reflecting surface, and the incident ray strikes from an object. Incident ray comes from an object, strikes this surface at this point O. We draw a normal from this point. Normal is a perpendicular line from the surface, right? ON, let ON be the normal. And what happens? This incident ray will bounce back from the surface, and this is called as the reflected ray. So OR is the reflected ray, and the angle between the incident ray and the normal is called as angle of incidence, and the angle between the reflected ray and the normal, you call it as the angle of reflection, right? So there are laws of reflection. To explain this phenomena, there are laws of reflection. There are 2 points in the laws of reflection, which states that, first point states that angle of incidence is always equal to the angle of incidence is always equal to the angle of refraction, R. So angle of I is equal to R. So this is, I write the R clearly, much clearly, right? So this is R. I is equal to R. Angle of incidence is always equal to the angle of reflection. If I is 30 degree, R will also be 30 degree. If I is 20 degree, R will also be 20 degrees. So I is equal to R. One more point is that this incident ray, this IO, we call it as the incident ray, and this ON, we call it as the normal, and this OR, we call it as the reflected ray. So the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal lie in the same plane. For example, let me draw it with another color. So this is going to be in the same plane. So this is going to be the same plane. So this, if this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, then this is an xy plane. All the three will lie in the same plane. So the angle, the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal lie in the same plane, say xy plane. So there are 2 points. First point to explain reflection is that angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. I is equal to R. Second point is that the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal lie in the same plane. So these are the 2 points which we are going to discuss, right? Now we work out a small problem, for example, using this laws of reflection. I once again draw a surface, reflecting surface. Let this be the reflecting surface, right? And I draw an incident line, incident ray. So let this be an incident ray, okay? So I call this as I, as usual, right? And now what is my aim? My aim is going to draw a normal from this point. So I draw a normal from this point, which is an imaginary line. Let us N, and this point, angle of the point of incidence, I mark it as O. So ON is the normal, and now I draw the reflected ray. So I call this as R. So this is my R, okay? So this is my R. Now if this angle, say, is 27 degrees, then what would be this angle? Find R. So R, according to law of reflection, angle of incidence will always be equal to the angle of reflection. Therefore R will also be 27 degrees. No doubt, we need not calculate. We can write just like that, 27 degrees. So we can write as it is, right? So this is our 27 degrees, okay? So this is what we have. If this is 27 degrees, then this has to be 27 degrees, right? Now one more problem. What will happen if I have if I am given like this, so I once again draw a surface, reflecting surface, and I give this as an homework, right, or an assignment. You take this as an assignment. If this incident angle, if there is an incident ray, and the angle between the incident ray and the surface, not the normal, is 40 degrees. Suppose if this is given as 40 degrees, if this is given as 40 degrees, right? Now this, let this be the normal, okay? Let this be the normal, okay? This point be O, and let this be I, okay? Let this be I, right? Let this be I, and I want to calculate this value I, angle of incidence, okay, and also this angle of reflection, right? We'll meet in the next video. Thank you.